Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Jackson Hewitt, founder and CEO of Loyalty Brands, which houses a successful group of franchise systems, including financial services, accounting and tax services, dog grooming, and business brokerage. You probably recognize the names of some of the powerhouse brands that he has started and built over the years. Jackson Hewitt was formed in 1982 to bring the new technology of software to the process of tax preparation for customers across the country. They used franchising and a variety of creative partnerships with places like Sam's Club and Kmart to grow the brand to 1,500 locations by 1997, when the business was sold for $483 million. Later, he would go on to start Liberty Tax Service, which grew to 4,000 locations by 2012. Then in 2018, John left Liberty to start Loyalty Brands. He has brought in over 5,000 franchisees across his different brands. He's opened over 10,000 offices. He's founded 2 top 100 retail franchise chains, and he's the author of the best-selling book called iCompete: How My Extraordinary Strategy for Winning Can Be Yours. Before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to save over $900 per employee per year by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now, back to our guest today, the CEO of Loyalty Brands, John. Thanks for making the time to share your story today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, John, you're someone who's achieved a great deal of success in your career. Tell us, what was the inspiration behind starting Loyalty Brands?
I got fortunate then when I was, after I sold Liberty Tax. I've been in the tax industry for 50 years, and I was having dinner with one of my former employees, an attorney, a franchise attorney at both Jackson Hewitt and Liberty. And he said, why don't you, well, I was during my non-compete, and he said, why don't you think about getting in, helping other franchise industries? He said, I have about 30 franchisors that I represent. One of them has a great industry. They have a great company. Every franchise makes about 6 figures, and yet they only have 13 franchises in 13 years. He said, you did that every few weeks, 3 weeks, you were bringing in 13. So he said, why don't you look at other industries? And so that's how I happened. And now we're just getting ready to start our 9th franchise chain. But really love the diversity and the cross-marketing opportunities in being in more than one brand.
So the desire really came from wanting to take the expertise that you developed over the years in building franchises and be able to offer those to other really good, strong brands that just don't sort of have the playbook that you do.
Exactly.
So let's do the part that everybody wants to do first, and then let's come back to the Loyalty Brands. Let's look back at the past successes that you've had. So you're working at H&R Block. You and your father had this idea to bring software into the tax prep world in the early 80s. And, for people who weren't alive back then, or, maybe don't remember, that was cutting edge. Not everybody had a computer, certainly not in their homes, and not most people at work. And so, I think this was sort of a pattern of you bringing different styles of innovation to improve over the current standard. And the biggest thing you did there with starting Jackson Hewitt was to bring software to the tax prep world. But even once you did that and you launched this competing service, you still had a big uphill climb. What were some of the other things besides the introduction of software that you did that were sort of innovative that allowed you to grow so quickly?
Well, you're right. You have to have differentiators to separate yourself from your competition. If David had gone onto the field with the same armor and shield and sword as Goliath, there wouldn't be any David and Goliath story. There'd be uh, David would have been the 189th guy killed by Goliath. So you have to do things different. Especially, we had when we started, we bought Jackson Hewitt and Mel Jackson and changed the name to Jackson Hewitt, and they had 6 locations, and we immediately set a huge, impossible goal to be number one, and it was impossible because H&R Block had 9,000. So to be bigger than Block, we had to grow by 8,995 offices, which is quite audacious. And today, I'm proud to say that there are 6,000 Jackson Hewitt locations, billion-dollar company, and 23rd largest retail chain in the country. But we never got quite the Block size. We have to do things different. So the major difference in 1981 and I'm sorry, 82 when we started, there was no one that was computerized. And as you said, Anthony, most of your listeners won't have been around then, but there weren't even a million PCs in the country. I mean, it was a rudimentary old time. There was no such thing as an Apple store. Everything you ordered had to be online. So it was a different world. So we computerized tax. It gave us a competitive advantage. But there were other advantages that we did that were different. And we looked at, and I had been with H&R Block for 12 years. So I saw their weaknesses that I invented a few things that are you steal, Sam Walton said, you don't just steal from your competitors, or ideas from your competitors, you look at all your customer experiences. So for example, in here in Virginia Beach during season, our hotels and our restaurants change things. They staff up, they expand their hours, they change things. Well, during the tax season, it's very seasonal, as you can imagine, and it's even more seasonal than most people think. It's we do most of our business not in the 15 weeks from January 1st to April 15th, but in just 4 weeks. So we looked at how can we improve our service to our customers, and we asked our customers and asked our franchisees that were close to the customer, what do you need and what can you do? And I love driving by. For example, H&R Block during that period is open. They're open all tax season from Monday to Friday, 9 to 9, and also Saturdays and Sundays. But let's just use Monday to Friday. Well, during that time when you're really busy, I love driving by an H&R Block office at 8:45 in the morning and seeing a customer standing outside and the preparer sitting in the office working with the lights on. And what would you do? I mean, if you're owned a competing business, you're going to be open. And so
Open that
what a
door.
simple competitive advantage is expand your hours during that peak period. And we open during those 4 weeks. We open at 7 a.m. And then at 9 o'clock at night, there's a knock on the door. And at 5 after 9 at H&R Block, they wave them away. They don't even get out of their desk. Come back tomorrow. Well, what would you do? You're going to grab that customer. It's your business. You're an owner. So one of the things we did is made sure that every office was franchised. So we had an owner mentality. In my thousands of people I've employed in my 55 years, only 2 or 3% act like owners, but my owners act like owners. And so huge differentiator that got us 10% more business every year is simplistically, it is not rocket science. You just expand your hours during peak. Other industries do that, right? The hotels in Virginia Beach, the restaurants in Virginia Beach, it's a very seasonal here. It's a very seasonal, summer tourist area. And so it's easy. You steal ideas from competitors. And so we have about 15 different competitive things that we do better that are objective, not subjective, but objectively better than our competition. And those are the things that set us apart from H&R Block back in the 80s when we beat them every year. We grew faster than them every year in the entire 15 years I was there.
I like it. Sometimes the best solutions are the most simple. Stay open later, franchise, so you get an owner mentality in every office rather than a manager/employee mentality. That person's going to work harder, work longer, think more creatively to problem solve. So tell me, what was it that gave you and your father the vision to see where things were going with software back in the early 80s when H&R Block couldn't?
I'll credit that drive to my father. I was not, I had taken one course in college with a mainframe computer, and you had to use these cards that these punch cards that you fed the computer, and you couldn't even type, let alone there was no such thing as typing on a dashboard. But he had bought one of the first Apples by mail, and it was in the 70s. It was so ancient that it's in the Smithsonian today. We went to the Science Smithsonian a few years ago, and there's the little Apple 48K. If anyone knows what that means, that's 1/100,000th of a cell phone today, right? In capability. But he had experimented with it and said, we can computerize taxes. And he said, computers are going to. His company was advanced. He was CFO of a public company, and his company was one of the most advanced in the United States in using internal software. So he saw it, and it was his vision and drive that got me to leave H&R Block. I was happy I loved my job, and I loved my where I was in the company, and I thought I was going to be at H&R Block forever, or at least a long time. I've been there 12 years. I was running 250 offices at 30 years old, and so I thought I'd be CEO of H&R Block someday. But he pulled me out of there. I give him all the credit for that.
You mentioned that there were 15 things that made you objectively better. I'm curious if some of those have been sort of common core anchor values that you've continued to implement in your other businesses going forward. That this helped to make Jackson Hewitt better, and we're going to implement the same kind of thing in the future businesses, Liberty Tax, and now loyalty brands, et cetera.
Yeah, you already mentioned two that are across all brands, but my real favorite is and it's amazing to me because it's been so successful. Is after every customer comes in, 2 days later we call them and ask them and it has several purposes. One is so we can improve on the fly, because it doesn't matter, Anthony, if you or I think that we're doing a good job. It only matters if the customer thinks we're doing a good job. And everyone surveys their customer, and they're foolish in almost every company that does it. If not, every company is foolish in to think they're going to get a realistic answer by a email survey or handing them a postcard or survey. You only get the people that are very happy or very unhappy or have a lot of time. You get, when you survey customers normally, you're lucky to get a 5% retention of that or a response. But we call the customers, and what we learn is the obvious thing you get is you get to improve your service along the way. In the tax business, we don't want to wait till April 15th to see how each preparer is being appreciated by the customer. We want to know on January 15th and January 20th and January 25th. So we get to improve on the fly, but also customers love being called. Almost no one in this country is calling their customer. So it isn't just an advantage over H&R Block and our competitors, it's an advantage in that's unique in virtually all industries. I quiz many people and talk about this often. Said, have you been called by a customer or by a business in the last year? And the only ones that are come up time and again are automobile. When you buy an automobile, typically you'll be called, but in every other industry, they don't call you. So our customers love to be called. So our retention rate goes up. It goes up by approximately double digits, 10%. Then something that most people don't think about is most people in this country are poor at asking for referrals. And our tax preparers, I mean, you want them to ask for a referral, right? There's a book called Guerrilla Marketing for Accountants. And this accounting firm wrote a book, and they quizzed all their customers, and they said, tell us that how do we do for you? And 95% were happy. And how many of you referred another customer? And only half of the people that were happy had referred a customer. And they said, well, why didn't you refer? And they said, well, no one asked us. We didn't know you wanted more business. So we found that in our two biggest franchises, our mobile dog grooming and our tax franchise today, neither the mobile groomers nor the taxpayers are good at asking for a referral. I mean, you try to get them to, you try to explain it to how important it is, but at the end of the day, they're either too shy or they don't care. And heaven forbid they ever go outside to a party or something and mention your company. I mean, it's amazing. So this very personable caller is instructed to you want to show the customer you care, and 95% of them are happy, and then ask for a referral. So our referrals are 50% higher than our competitors, just because we have this very personable person ensuring that the customer understands that we want, number one, we want referrals, and we pay a $50 referral fee. So the fee isn't really the big motivator. It only changes about 10 or 20% of the people's time. The biggest motivator is that someone has asked them, and then they think about it. Then, do you know someone else that might benefit from our service? And that forces the customer to think about it and know that you're looking for more business. So that's my favorite of all the differentiator, because it's not just industry specific. It's better than every customer service that our customer is going to have that year.
So for everybody listening, break it down into very simple steps. It's call the customer very shortly after the service has been provided. You ask them two questions. You ask them, are you happy with the service? And then you listen, right? If there's a problem, this gives you a chance to solve it. And then you ask them, is there somebody that you could refer? Is there someone you know that would benefit from our services? And if they say yes, how do you sort of coach that handoff? How do you ask them to kind of make that introduction?
Well, if you have the numbers handy, we'd love to reach out, and you don't mind, I'd love to reach out for you. But please, and we're going to give you $50 for every customer you send. If you send us 5 customers, then your tax return costs you nothing, or your grooming costs. If you send us 2 customers, your groom costs nothing.
Right. Okay. So back to the timeline. So at some point you make the decision to sell Jackson Hewitt. What was behind that decision? Was it just a time to give investors return on their capital?
It's a long story, but what happens with, and it's related to the problem in private equity, and it was a private equity investor battle. So what happens in private equity when they invest, and I've had in all my chains in Loyalty and Liberty and Jackson Hewitt, I took venture capital private equity. Well, the problem with that is when you start out, you're both thinking long term, because you're both thinking as a great entrepreneur, you're always thinking 5 years ahead or more. And when the venture capital or the private equity invests, they're thinking 5 years in advance. But they're soon in they want to be out in 5 to 7 years. So as you approach the fifth to seventh year, they become a little antsy and they want to maximize the short-term numbers so they can get at the highest price when they exit. So they're way less concerned. They don't want to invest money today that's not going to benefit the company financially until 2 or 3 years from now. You, as a great entrepreneur or leader, you're always thinking about, we want to be number one. We want to make this company the best, and we have to have vision and keep the pulse and stay. I mean, if it's AI or computers, we have to have the state of the art. And so we have to invest today in order to reap the harvest in the future. So you become at odds with as the investor, the private equity gets long in the tooth. And then private equity, what happens in virtually every company that starts up, I mean, even Steve Jobs got fired from his own company, from Apple, right? And the greatest mind in development of personal computers ever, he got fired from his own company, and then of course years later went back. But it's venture capital 101, that the entrepreneur that starts with 6 offices, like I did, isn't going to be able to grow and run thousands of offices. So at some point, you need to replace them. And so in 1995, there was an extraordinary, once in a lifetime event. In my 55 years of dealing with the IRS broke down one year, and it was a disaster. It was so bad that, for example, H&R Block had never, they've been public since 1961, and this is 1995, and they had only 2 years where they had a decrease in profits. And this year, and those were less than $2 million. This year they lost $60 million. And it was so bad that Tom Block, the son of founder Henry Block, was CEO. He resigned during the tax season. He resigned on April 9th. The pressure was so bad, and it would take a long time to explain what happened. But the venture capitalist was just not understanding, and we had a disastrous season. Not as bad as Block, way better than Block, but we had a disastrous season and didn't come close to making our numbers. And he took that opportunity to try to take over the company and fire me. So we had a long battle that went on. It took a year, but I eventually agreed to leave a year later after we saved the company and had the greatest year ever. So I fought for about 9 months and then finally agreed to leave after the tax season. So 95 was my worst year ever in the tax industry. And then 96 was the best because the rebound was so strong, with all the customers who had not paid us in 95 paid us in 96. So again, long story, but so we got 2 payments instead. And so it was just an incredible year. So I left. So I was forced to sell because of an internal battle that was started by my venture capitalists. And it was over when you have bad years, it's either your fault as CEO. Typically it's internal or external. I've had bad years and made mistakes that were my fault. This was not my fault. This was an industry situation. And in 15 years of running the company, we had a unanimous board agreement for 14 years until that last year. So I was forced to leave the company, and the company was sold. And it was sold at an amazing profit. We had invested, the total investment in 1982 was $129,000. And if you had been one of those investors that invested in 1982, your life would have changed, because the smallest investment was $5,000, and it was worth $2 million for every $5,000 you invested in 15 years later. So we changed changed thousands of, I mean, all the investors' lives and franchisees and so forth. And it was a public company in 1997, the year I left. It was the #1 stock on any exchange. Back then, there was not only the Nasdaq and the American, there was the American, and so there was 3 stock exchanges, and the New York, American, and Nasdaq, and we were the #1 stock increase. The stock went from 6 to 68, and because of that incredible year we had after the disaster year in 95, we were showing an incredible trajectory of growth.
I want to dig in a little bit more to that disastrous year because, I think these are where some of the most helpful stories for other entrepreneurs and leaders are. Because, you can go on Wikipedia, you can go online and you can read the accolades and all the accomplishments that you've had. And people look at you and say, wow, that guy, he just has it together. He was born to succeed. He never makes mistakes. It's just all rainbows and sunshine for him. And they don't see some of the real big struggles that happen behind the scenes. And I have to imagine that, I mean, you use the word disastrous year, worst year in my career, had to have been really challenging. How did you cope with that? How did you deal with what has to be some negative self chatter that comes in, questioning yourself? Am I doing the right thing? Should I be fighting this? Should I leave? Kind of talk us through some of those behind the scenes struggles.
Yeah, can I take you back to another bad year that was my fault?
Absolutely.
And talk about that, and then if you want we can come back to that, because that might be more
That's probably more instructive. Yeah.
right, but yeah, because in 1988 we were 6 years old, and we had just done an offering and raised money. I hired 2 of my people that had worked with me at Block, so we had executives. I had hired 2 executives, and all of a sudden I got this great opportunity. We had about 49 offices the previous tax season, and we had an opportunity. The second largest tax service in the country called us and was for sale. And H&R Block had 9,000 offices and we had 6. Well, this second largest had a couple hundred. And they approached us late in the year in October and said, would you like to buy our relationship? They had most of your listeners probably don't even remember Montgomery Ward, but at the time Montgomery Ward is a miniature Sears. I mean, 2/3 or 3/4 the size of the Sears chain. And H&R Block had a very successful Sears relationship. They were in about 600 locations doing about 1 million tax returns, and very, very successful in uh, uh, Sears. And so there was another company that had a relationship with Montgomery Ward, and they were in about 150 Montgomery Ward locations. And so they said they would sell the relationship to us. So we said, well, we just hired these 2 people. We raised money, and what a perfect time. It's like God saying, okay, here. And we would immediately, my goal was to be #1, but before you could get to be #1, you got to be #2. And now 6 years into my existence, I was going to have over 250 offices and be #2 in the country. And what a accolade, what a achievement, right? And so I got full of myself and decided that, okay, we're going to go for it. Well, it was too late in the season, too late as we were approaching the season. Come to find out, we didn't do this due diligence, that we didn't go and talk to the taxpayers who had worked in the Montgomery Ward. The company was coming off a bad year, and in Montgomery Ward, this company we acquired, and they hadn't paid all the bonuses that were due, or they hadn't honored their word with their preparers. And so when we went to hire their preparers from the previous year, say we had a great office in one of their best stores is in St. Petersburg, Florida. We go to hire the preparers from last year. They were angry at the company because they either didn't get paid their bonus, or They missed paychecks during the season, whatever they had screwed up. So they were all mad at the company. And so our retention of employees was very low. And all of these employees, if you worked in St. Petersburg, Florida, you had access to the database. You knew the names and addresses and phone numbers of all the customers. So not only did you compete, you went out and you called those previous customers and said, wait, I'm not in the store anymore. I'm over here in my home or in this office. And some of the preparers in 2 or 3 of the locations in the country, they would come into the Montgomery ward and grab the people walking in and saying, I'm over here now. Can I do your tax return? So we had to struggle to staff the offices, number one. And then we have this immense company in virtually every location. We had angry tax preparers, not virtually ever, but certainly in at least half of the locations, we had existing customers that said, or I'm sorry, existing taxpayers from the past that were competing with us and using our customer list. So it was so bad that we lost so much money that we had to go to Montgomery Ward. It was one of the biggest beatings I got. We went to Montgomery Ward headquarters in Chicago in February and said, we have to close 100 of these 150 offices. We're just getting killed, bloodbath. And they were angry, right? Because they had, we're new kids on the block. They had been dealing with this other company.
They thought you screwed it up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're just cherry picking. They accused me of cherry picking, that these other locations aren't as profitable for you. You're just cherry picking the best ones and saving them for yourself. And we don't know you from Adam, right? We've only known you since you came here in November, December, and promised that you could do a good job, even better than before. You're worse. You're horrible. So we got beat up badly in that meeting, but we did a good job in the offices we kept open. We did a good job at shutting down the ones that we shut down in terms of customer service. They didn't get faced with a lot of customer issues. So we handled the customer issues well. And we finally did what we said we were going to do and completed the season in those offices. And we went back after the season and, kind of begged for forgiveness and give us another chance. And we eventually grew it back way bigger and stronger than it had been initially, and went back into those offices in the future. But it was we had to tighten our belts, and we almost went bankrupt. And so after the season, we most of the staff, we took a 50% pay cut. So I said from May until December, if you're making, back then, the best people were making $50,000 a year at corporate headquarters. You're only, from now until December, you're only on half pay. And so, and some people we laid, I went down to zero. I took zero pay. So I took zero salary during that off season. We went to our advertisers and said, our advertising company, we owed them about 100 or 150,000 that was due in May. And we said, well, we can't pay you, but we will pay you over a monthly. We'll pay this back monthly, our advertising company. So we had to make deals with internally with staff, with our vendors. One of our board of directors stepped up, and we needed about $500,000 to get from December to February till we started getting big checks in February from our customers. And he stepped up and lent us the money. But everyone had to participate. We had to get everyone to buy in, the employees, the franchisees, the new franchisees. We sold franchise. We were able to sell many of those existing Montgomery Ward offices as franchises, and many of them to our own employees because we couldn't pay them, and here's an opportunity. We'll give you a good deal on the offer. So we had to do many things, and we made it through, and then had an incredible horrible. It went down into the valley, and then another huge peak. The following year was a great year in terms of growth and profitability. But yeah, you had to tighten your belt, and we almost went bankrupt.
What was the big lesson there? What would you have done differently?
I didn't do enough due diligence in buying that company. That even though it was a great opportunity, it had the appearance of a great opportunity, but I would have called the taxpayers and around the country, sampling. We would have sampled the taxpayers around the country, and there were about there each of the offices. Typically, they would have one person who managed 3 to 5 offices. So we didn't do sampling and call the management around the country, and just to ensure that they were going to come back and work with us.
So during this difficult time, was there ever a period where you thought about just throwing in the towel? I mean, you said you almost filed for bankruptcy. You're like, it might just be easier if we just quit.
Oh, even when we filed, if we had filed for bankruptcy, we would have kept going, right? There's no question. And so I always have I'm a chess player, and so I'm always thinking ahead. If this happens, I'm going to do that. If they do this, I'm going to do that. And so in my mind, I always had plan B. This is our skeleton crew. It's down to, so instead of whatever, we had 30 employees, it'll get down to 5 or 6 of us. And we will, instead of going into the next year with 200 offices, we'll go in with 100. But we're never going to quit. They got to kill me to stop. And the number one most important attribute in success is perseverance. And everyone gets punished and knocked down and beaten up. I've never seen a human being that just skated through life. Everyone has adversity. And the great winners, the people that are the most successful, they never stay down. So no, you can't keep me down. Again, you got to kill me to stop me. We were going to move forward. It would have been smaller than smaller, and we would have to circle the wagons and be a much smaller group going into the tax season. But the tax seasons is, we were always going to have a harvest and a successful tax season, except for those tax seasons that were affected by the industry or that significant mistake that I made in deciding to grab that opportunity. So it's either my fault or industry fault, but we're always gonna persevere.
You got to kill me to stop me. Where does this dogged determination come from, John? Is you feel like this is something that you were just born with, or was it cultivated as you grew up?
It's been in my life as long as I can remember. So I would have to say I was born with it. And because I never remember changing and thinking, okay, from now on, I'm never going to give up. Right? I mean, I was always that. I'm a poor loser. And my philosophy is show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. So I'm a poor loser. And like Vince Lombardi said, he said, you go onto the field every time with a game plan. And you're either going to win, you're gonna meet your game plan and win, or you're going to learn something. You're going to learn a lesson so that you're more prepared to win the next time. So I'm always learning, and I'm committed to improvement. Our mission statement at Liberty was set the standard, have fun, set the standard, improve each day. So I'm committed to improve, to have the best system, and we've always had the best system. We've always been best in the industry. When I was with Block or Jackson Hewitt or Liberty or now ATAX, we've always been best in class, best in industry. So I'm always going to beat the competition because we have We have we're much more fanatical in exceeding customers' expectations.
So you exit Jackson Hewitt. You are not done with the tax space, obviously, because you go on to start Liberty Tax, but you sort of have a little bit of a problem because you now have to compete against this monstrosity that you've already built over here with your name attached to it, with the software that you helped develop, with all of the systems and processes that you built these innovative ways. What were you going to bring to Liberty Tax to compete with this amazing machine that you had built over here?
Yeah, you missed one thing. You were right. Well, I had to compete with our system, our software, and my name, but I also had to compete with my people. Right? These are people I trained and knew how to run a tax business. They were better than Block people. So every year Jackson Hewitt was beating up on Block. So my people knew they knew those differentiators, right? They knew differentiators. Well, there's good news in a couple things. First of all, both H&R Block and Jackson Hewitt and now Liberty, it's since I left all three of those companies, they've never been able to get a good CEO. They have the average length of a CEO is 2 years. So Block, since I left Block or since I started Liberty, they've had a dozen different CEOs. Jackson Hewitt's had a dozen different CEOs. And Liberty's I left 5 years ago, they've had 5 CEOs. So they're one a year on average. So what happens is you don't get anyone that's experienced, and they take my ideas that I just told you and they throw them out. They don't like them. We're not going to expand our hours. It's not that important, right? We're not going to call customers. It's not that important. So even though, and then they get rid of my franchisees, they get rid of my staff, and they don't listen to them. I call it CEO disease. That, from what I've seen, is, and I saw it much more clearly when I left Liberty, because I stayed on as chairman of the board for two different CEOs. And it seems to me, Anthony, that when someone gets appointed CEO, it's like they're Caesar or they're God. They're supposed to know. Even the last person I hired at Liberty before I left, when I was chairman of the board, she was a franchisee, one of my best franchisees, one of my best performing. But and she agreed. She became CEO of a public company. I mean, we had gotten to $500 million market cap, a large company with 4,000 locations. And she agreed. She was from South Dakota, a CPA with one office that went to 4 Liberty's offices, very successful Liberty offices, sold their CPA practice. And I brought her in to be CEO of the company, but with the understanding that I would help her. Well, she didn't listen to me. They ignore my advice. So I'm competing with inferior competition. The people that have replaced me are not at my level. I have better systems. And the systems I described to you that are clear differentiators, expanding your hours, even though they were doing it at Jackson Hewitt, they got rid of it. So one was, I'm competing against inferior inexperienced. They don't know the tax industry. And everyone came in. I mean, in the tax industry, for example, every single CEO that comes in that's never been in the industry. And out of the 30 people I described, the 12 CEOs at Block and Jackson Hewitt and at Liberty, only one had any tax experience. So they don't know anything about tax. So they come in and they think they have a good idea. You know what? It looks like we should do something the rest of the year with these offices. They're closed for 8 months. We should be able to sell insurance or do real estate or do financial planning. And it's like they have a light bulb went off in their mind and they became the smartest person ever. And like, don't you think we thought about that? Don't you think John Hewitt's been thinking about that for 55 years and Henry Block thought about that? Do you think you're the first person that ever thought of that simple idea? And worse than that, do you think we haven't tried it? We've tried everything we can think of. It doesn't work. So they go in idea after idea that they invent has been tried and failed. And most of them failed, and yet they implement it because they have CEO disease. The first thing I would do if I took over a company in an industry I didn't understand is I would ask my top people, tell me about this industry and give me, and here's what I'm thinking of it. Is this the right way to think about it? But they didn't listen to the top people. So that was one thing. But I had read a book called Guerrilla Marketing just before I left Jackson Hewitt I think it was published in the 90s. And I read it the year before I left Jackson Hewitt. We began implementing it. And they got rid of it as soon as I left. And one of the things we did is we had little donut boxes. If you think of a box of Munchkins, we had little donut boxes that held about 4 donuts that said Jackson Hewitt on it. And we would take it door to door to businesses. They had a coupon on with it. They called it the donut. The next CEO called it the donut caper and said, we're getting rid of the donut caper. He bragged about it. Well, it was working in effect, but he was so we implemented guerrilla marketing, and the most obvious, clear thing that people recognize is our Liberty waiver. When I started Liberty when we only had 50 offices and then 100, 200, 400, people say, well, Liberty Tax, I never heard of it. But within 4 or 5 years, especially, I go to Wall Street and everywhere I went, they was, oh, Liberty Tax, are you the one with the waiver, the costume character out in front of the offices? So yeah, when you talk about differentiators, that's one of our differentiators, right? When you think about it, the size of one of our territories is about 35,000 people. In that area of 35,000 people, there's over 300 businesses on average. Now, all of them are trying to get your attention, right? They're doing phone book, TV, radio, newspaper, billboard. They have signs, they have SEO, they have online. Everyone's trying to get your attention, right? And everyone's doing the same thing. They're in the Yellow Pages back then and on the radio. Everyone's doing the same thing. But how many people, Anthony, have a costume character from January 1st to April 15th dancing out in front of your store, right? There's one. So it's a differentiator. So our guerrilla marketing became our differentiator. Our Liberty waiver set the standard. And we would put on a Liberty costume and go door to door with gifts and, cookies and donuts and pizza or candy. And then we would have roadside parties. So every Saturday we'd have a party outside the office, and we'd be cooking hot dogs or hamburgers and have a popcorn machine. And sometimes they'd have donkeys once they had elephants or fire trucks so we would catch attention, and no one else is doing it. So our real claim to fame was guerrilla marketing. So, and then it was supplemented with having the best system that when I left Jackson Hewitt, they abandoned it. And you froze there for a minute.
Yes.
Okay,
we got a great answer there. So we'll just we'll stitch that part out. But so your advantage was the guerrilla marketing, plus the fact that your previous company got rid of a lot of the great ideas that you had implemented that were working, and so you could implement those into your new company, Liberty Tax, and not be competing on some of those same ideas. What do you attribute this CEO disease to? Is it just an ego thing? Like somebody comes in and they feel like they've got to put their fingerprints on it?
I try not to get into sometimes with my employees, I can be brutally frank. And sometimes I call them in and they want to explain to me why they made a mistake. And I say this in a funny way and not in a mean way, but I say, Anthony, I don't want to get into the cesspool of how you think. I don't want to know why you made that mistake, right? You need to learn how I think. So I try not to get into the cesspool of how those CEOs think. But to me, I'm incredulous. I'm incredulous at the stupid things they do and the things that they replace that are working. And there is somehow, yes, I think that the title CEO, it's all of a sudden you think you're supposed to know. So if you and so my suspicion is they get an arrogance that they're supposed to know. And so it's like they come up with this theory. This is another common theory that, especially if you've never been in the franchise industry before, we need to have a model office, and we need to show the franchisees how to do it, right? Well, the thing that they're missing every time is that the model office is corporate employees, and only 2% of them are going to act like owners. And the franchisees are going to out hustle, outwork, outthink, out create you every time. You can't create a better office than the franchisees can. The best office in every company is the franchisee's office because they're owners and they're much more committed. But this CEO thinks, here's another simple example. At my conventions, I invented this 30 years ago at Jackson Hewitt. We sit our franchisees down and say, tell us how to improve. Tell us how to improve our tax software. Tell us how to improve our technical support. Tell us how to improve our online marketing and our guerrilla marketing. And then we listen to every idea and we write it down. And then after the convention, we sit down with the executives and franchise representatives and say, what are we going to change this year? What are we going to change sometime in the future? And what are we not going to change? Well, I'm proud to say that in my 30 years of doing this, more than 50% of the ideas are implemented that year. But each time I left the company, I left Jackson Hewitt, I left Liberty, they stopped doing that. They stopped asking the franchisees for input. They said, no, we're supposed to know, tell them how to do it. We're supposed to tell them how to do it. Well, sorry, you're never going to be as good. Your company employees are never going to be as good on average as your quality franchisees. You get these great entrepreneurs that are thinking about it. An employee doesn't think about, most employees don't think about this business 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But when you're an owner, you're taking a shower or running or bicycling, you're thinking about business and you're thinking about what can I do better? How can I get one more employee, one more customer? How can I hire a better employee? How can I get a customer? How can I market? How can I save money? You're never going to be at that level because at the end of the day, they're employees and they're not owners.
So you grow Liberty Tax for several years, very impressive growth trajectory again, and then decide to step away. What was behind that decision?
Same thing happened 20 years later. I had this time though, when you start a company and you build it to a $500 million company for 15 years, you better be able the next time to do it a lot better, right? So one of the first things I said is, okay, I'm never going to let that happen again where I'm going to lose control. So I'm going to keep controlling stock. So now at Liberty Stock, even though we were a public company, I had controlling stock. So I got to have one more vote than one more director than all the other shareholders. So there were 9 directors. I appointed 5, including myself, and the others got to vote for 4. So same thing happened. We had one bad year, and the venture capitalists again tries to take over the company because it was my fault, right? I mean, after 20 years, this venture capitalist he did something very unusual. He invested in, and then about 5 years later, sold his investment at a nice profit. And then this almost never happens in venture capital. Then on one of his next funds, he invested again. So he invested twice. right? But the first time he had made a killing. I don't remember the number. Let's say he invested 3 million and sold it for 20 million, right? Now he invests another 3 million. So, but he decided, and he wanted the job as CEO. He wanted my job. So, but we had a bad year, and he came. So we had a civil war, that was very, very bloody, and they eviscerated me in the press. They did everything they could, and they finally did something I never thought that I never, in thinking it through this about my having control, I never realized what they could do. Well, he got his 3 board members on his side, so now there's 4 board members, and he got 4 of my officers on out of the. So I had 8 officers and 9 board members. So now it was 9 of us against 8 of them, and they came up with a great strategy. They said, and we're a public company, so their greatest strategy was, we said, if you don't agree to leave, John, we're all going to resign. The whole board's going to resign, and the 4 officers are going to resign. So we would have a bad year, and I would take the blame, right? I would get hit with the blame because they all quit. They're going to say they quit because of me. They eviscerated me. They quit one at a time eventually. And every time they quit, they used my own internal attorney firm, because my attorney was one of the people on the other side. They used my attorney to write the letter so that it was published. And there was a local reporter that treated me like I was the worst person in the history of the human race. Every time someone quit, they would say it was my fault. So eventually I sold my stock and left. And I was right. 5 years later, last summer, they bankrupted the company. So this company that had been worth $500 million, and they, after the battle, it was down to half of that. And but last year, these 5 CEOs with CEO disease bankrupted the company, and so the stock, which was worth, the stockholders who had 500 million of value, had 0. So and it was again, I'm not a fan of venture capital and private equity, because when things are bad, they turn on you. They can turn on you.
Is there a little bit of mixed feelings about that result, the company filing for bankruptcy? I mean, it's something that you built. It's a baby that you helped to birth. So it's got to be painful on the one hand, but in some ways, like, there's got to be some anger and resentment of them pushing you out. And it got to be some vindication, like, hey, without me, you guys couldn't do it.
Well, I'm vindicated in the fact that I was right, that these people that thought I was doing a bad job thought they could do better, and I needed to be replaced. They were wrong, right? They can't do better, and no one has done better. Every year they decrease by about 25% in locations. So that, when we peaked 7 years ago, we had 4,000 locations. They're down to 2,000 locations. But going bankrupt doesn't mean you go out of business. So the public really doesn't know. They still have 2,000 offices, and Liberty Tax is still around. But what really hurts is all the employees that they screwed, all the franchisees that they screwed. Remember, my goal is, well, I guess I haven't said it yet. My goal is to have fun, enjoy my life, and improve lives. And there were so many people there, that franchisees and employees, that I cared about and had improved their lives, and they took everything back. They destroyed hundreds and hundreds of good people's franchise in their lives out of greed, because they wanted to maximize their short-term profit. So they had the typical, what I've seen is the worst, maybe not the typical, but the worst kind of private equity is they only go after numbers, and they don't care about people. And the secret of having a great company is happy, successful employees and happy, successful franchisees. And at Liberty Tax, it was on the wall, big letters, 4-foot letters when you come in, happy, successful franchisees. Then when I was gone, they whitewashed it off the wall. And that's how they treated it. They didn't care about happy, successful franchisees. If you have happy, successful franchisees, you can't help but succeed. If you don't, you can't help but fail.
So then you step away, you decide to start loyalty brands. You have pulled together sort of this eclectic version or collection of brands. I see pet grooming, tax prep, which is very familiar to you, business brokers, home inspection. What's kind of the common thread that drew you to bring each of these brands under your umbrella?
Well, again, I made the good news is uh, that I have two brands, and it looks like maybe three that are doing well. Great. And I'm the only person that's developed two of the top 100 brands in this country, 100 franchise brand. No one else has done more than one. I mean, you got one McDonald's and one Wendy's and one H&R Block, but I did both Jackson Hewitt Liberty. It looks like Zoom and Grooming, mobile dog grooming, in 3 years will be one of the top 100 largest retail chains of the country. So that's growing so fast. So um, the so I'll have done it 3 times. No one else has done it twice. So it's on that kind of same kind of trajectory that Liberty Tax and Jackson Hewitt were, even way faster than A-Tax. So the others, and then I made a mistake in when I started this concept of having multiple brands. Here's what I thought. I thought, well, I can come into an organization. Let's say you have a brand and you have your franchise chain. You have 10 or 20 locations, and you can't grow because you can't bring in new franchise. So what you get when you get with us is you get, number one is our mentoring. We call it loyalty brands because I have 10 people that have been with me 30 years or more. And I have another 10 that have been with me 20 years or more. So we have huge mentoring capability. We're great at franchise development, sales. I brought in at Liberty, we brought in almost one a day. We brought in 12 years, we brought in 4,000 franchisees. That's over 300. I mean, that's 330 a year that we're bringing in. So I have the capability. Plus, I brought in 5,200 franchisees that had hundreds of thousands of employees. So we should give these new franchise systems access to all the people that have been with me before that know that John Hewitt's a great operator and want to join me. And in truth, many of the other brands have been developed by former Liberty people or Jackson Hewitt people. But I made this huge mistake that I thought that I could change them. And what I learned is this, that each of the times I went in, that most franchisors fail. In this country, you only, to be in the top 50% of all franchisors, you only need 20 locations. So there are 400 that are start every year and 400 fail each year. It's not the same 400, but I mean, so there's been no growth in the number of franchisors in this country. And the reason they fail is this. Well, simply, they don't get it, that it's happy, successful franchisees. But what happens is you get an entrepreneur, has a great company, and he has a mom and pop, let's say it's a pizza chain, pizza store with 1, 2, 5 locations, doing a great job. And someone comes to him and said, why don't you franchise? I would like one of these. This is a great concept, the special crust or whatever. And so he gets full of himself and says, okay, I'm going to franchise. Well, a couple things happen. Number one is it costs a few $100,000 to get up and running with all the marketing and legal work and so forth. And so now you have this mom and pop who's been doing a great job of running his stores as a owner, manager, CEO, founder, but now he has a second company. And he still needs the income from the first location because it takes 3 to 5 years at least. It took McDonald's 7 years before they made money from royalties. The only thing that saved McDonald's is they made money from leasing the land to the franchisees. And so it takes 3, 5, and so you're not making any money. So you need to have your money. So now you have 2 jobs. And one is you're running your mom and pop and you're a franchise. And so you don't have enough time to devote to the franchise. And then even worse is that running a franchise system is different than having employees, because having employees, they have to do what you say. Franchisees are very independent, very rogue, maverick, and very argumentative. And it's a whole different skill set running a franchise chain of entrepreneurs than running hundreds of employees. So I've had hundreds of employees, I've had thousands of franchises. It's a whole different skill set. And I found that none of the companies that I merged with had the founder could not make that transition. They could not make the transition of being a CEO of a franchise system, both because they still love their mom and pop and they're making all their money from that, but they just don't have the capability of dealing with entrepreneurs. And they, just like my children, just like my franchisees, they won't listen. And I've had about 5 or 6 divorces already with franchisors that we partner with that wouldn't listen to me. And so no matter, and if you don't listen, I can't help you. If you know you're not willing to, if you want to improve, you have to change. If you're not willing to change, I can't help you bring in new franchisees. So not happy with all of the chains I've been involved with, but I am happy with we have 3 that are going well, and the other one is roofing and siding and solar. But the 3 industries that we're doing really well in, and the rest are not meeting my minimum requirements of growth.
And in which territories are you looking to expand those opportunities? If someone's listening and they say, "Hey, I buy into John Hewitt. I want to be part of what he's handing out there." What?
Yeah, most of them are just the United States, but for example, a couple of them are in Canada. But I just think United States primarily.
Okay. John, you said your mission is to have fun and improve lives. How do you have fun away from work?
You know, when you love what you do, I'm never away from work. And so wherever, people say, do you go on vacation? I say I work every day and I vacation every day. So I travel 2 or 3 days a week wherever I go. If I go to San Diego or Chicago or Jacksonville, Florida, or anywhere I go in the country, there's people that either are interested in joining me or have already, and they're existing franchisees. I was in Toledo the other day, and my franchisee there from Liberty had just won a franchisee of the year award with Liberty Tax, and where I left 5 or 6 years ago, and he's still gung ho and Liberty Tax. And we went out to dinner. We went out with Prospect. So yeah, when I was a kid, I thought I was cocky because I think the difference between confidence and cocky is confidence. You've already done it, and I was cocky. I'm going to be a millionaire, and I'll just retire. And I realized that's crazy. What would I do? I love playing bridge. I'm a life master bridge player. I love playing chess. I love horse racing, but nothing is as much fun as every day I get to change people's lives. I saw Denzel Washington in Facebook. He's totally surprising comment. He said, this is about 6 weeks ago. He said, the most selfish people are those that are changing people's lives and improving lives. I said, what? What are you talking about? Because those are the bad. And he said, because they're the happiest people. Because there's nothing more rewarding than changing people's lives, improving lives. In my whole life, there's nothing more rewarding than thinking of all the tens of thousands of lives I've changed. 1,000 millionaires already.
John, I just have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I want to do a few things. First, if you like today's content, and of course you did because you listened all the way to the end, then hit subscribe, like, or share on your favorite podcast app. I also want to point people to your website, loyaltybrands.com. And am I correct in understanding that you're giving out free copies of your book?
Anyone that reaches out to me, John@loyaltybrands.com, I'm sending them a free book.
There you go. Okay, last question, John. What are the biggest changes that you see coming to your collection of brands here in the next 5 years?
I think that because of my age, because I'm in next month, I'll be 75. But it seems they're never going to be able to stop me without killing me. And I'm always going to be in business. But it seems to me Having 8 or 9 brands is too many. So I think I'll be down to, we'll sell off those brands and focus on 1 or 2 industries.
I'm going to go back on that. I said that was one last question, but it occurred to me, John, your story's been really well told. You've done lots of interviews over the years, been asked lots of questions. What's the question that you wished people asked you that they don't?
I don't do what ifs, so I never think about that. I think it's a waste of time to do what if. So I never say, well, what if they had asked me that? So it never occurs to me.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. Well, John, thanks for sharing your story with us today. I really appreciate your time.
Anthony, it was my pleasure.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.